Good evening, everyone.
大家下午好。
We continue our study in the book of Jonah, chapter 1.
我们今天再继续研读《耶拿书》第一章。
We ended last week with verse 7.
上个星期我们来到第7节。
In verse 7, we were talking about how they tried to draw lots to see who was the problem here.
在第7节的时候，我们看到说，船上的人他们就自谦来看一下是谁造成这个灾难的缘故。
And it says here that as they cast lots, the lot fell on Jonah.
这里说的，于是他们自谦自处约拿来。
And now we continue with verse 8.
现在我们看一下第8节。
As a background of verse 8, we need to know that everyone on the ship, with the exception of Jonah, were all not non-Israelites.
我们要清楚知道，在这艘船上呢，除了约拿，其他人都不是以色列人。
This is something we must bear in mind and be very clear.
对于这一点呢，我们要记住和也比较清楚。
And as we read last week, that each of them, being afraid to die, called out loudly to their gods to save them.
上个期我们看到，每一个人都害怕死亡，说明他们大声的求告他们各自的神。
The only one who never called out was Jonah.
唯一一个没有求告的就是约拿。
And he went down to the back of the ship at the bottom to go to sleep.
约拿呢，下到船舱下去，底舱下去，而且呢沉睡。
And that is a very different reaction to the rest of the sailors on the ship.
对于其他的水手来看，这个是很特别的反应。
And now in verse 8, that the lot has fallen onto Jonah, they are going to ask Jonah a number of very important questions.
既然呢，这个天指出了约拿来说，他们要问这个约拿一些重要的问题。
And they said to him,
众人对他说，
and they are asking for answers and says, tell us now.
而且呢说，请你告诉我们，他们要知道答案。
And most importantly is the intent that they need an answer immediately.
而且呢是紧急的，他要现在。
And it is not expressed in the Chinese, but that is the urgency that they have in the Hebrew text.
在希伯来文就有这个紧急性的现在，但是中文里面没有了这个翻译。
Then it says, then they were asking this, on whose account has this catastrophe struck us?
然后就问说，这灾临到我们是因谁的缘故？
Now, on whose account is asking for the reason.
所以他们是要问知道原因是谁的原因，谁的缘故。
And that is them trying to find out the reason for the English is catastrophe.
所以他要知道这个灾就是这个灾难，
And
灾难临到的原因。
And the important word here is this catastrophe.
这个重要的字眼是灾。
And the meaning is actually evil.
它的原意呢是恶。
And in the Hebrew context, we must not be too fixed on our modern day meaning of evil.
在希伯来文里呢，我们不要把这个恶呢放在我们现在的意思。
Evil in Hebrew means something which is not acceptable or not functional in the eyes of the beholder.
在希伯来文呢，这个恶呢是在那个个人的那个当事者的眼中。
And so, in this case, when they talk about evil, they would say that this is the evil in their eyes.
所以当他们讲到这个是恶呢，是因为在于他们的眼中，这个是恶。
They are seeing the winds of the hurricane trying to break up the boat, and they are about to die.
因为他们看到这个狂风呢将会击溃这个船只，所以他们将要快要死了。
So this is a very Hebrew way of understanding evil.
所以这个就是以希伯来人的方式来明白这个恶。
The next statement is, what is your occupation and where do you come from?
下个问题是你以何事为业？你从哪里来？
Very, very straightforward questions.
一个很直接的问题。
And the idea here is, where do you come from? Literally says, from which land?
这边说你从哪里来，其实就是问他你从哪一片土地来的。
This is important. So the Chinese and the English translation is giving us an interpretation of the Hebrew words.
这个中文里面有翻译到这个希伯来文的意思。
What they want to know is from which land Jonah came from.
他们想知道是你约拿来自哪一片土地。
And here you will find that the English has this, and the Chinese has added these words.
所以英文里边有，而中文里边这也是说你是哪一国。
And it's not so much as a country in their minds, it's very much from which land they came from.
这边的国呢，不一定不是指真正的国家，而是指哪一片土地。
The last phrase is, from what people are you?
最后一个问题是属于哪一族的人？
Whenever we talk about people,
当我们讲到说人，
they also mean, even though you may come from a certain land, you may not be of a certain tribe.
这边未必说你来自那一片土地，就是属于那一片的支派的人。
And so they are looking for a particular type of people, right? The tribe of people.
所以他们也是想要知道是哪一个支派的人。
And so it is important for them to know Jonah.
所以他们很重要，想要知道约拿。
Because of Jonah, they are about to die.
因为约拿的缘故，他们将快要死了。
And so they are very curious, what is so special about Jonah?
所以他们很好奇，想知道约拿为什么这么特别。
He says, what is your occupation?
他说：“你是以何事为业？
And this is about, what does he do?
你做什么的？
And because of what you do, why is it all these evil is coming upon us?
你做着什么事，使到这些恶呢都来临到我们这里？
And this is the reply of Jonah.
接下来就是约拿的答案。
He says to them,
他说
and as you can see, the English has these words, to them,
英文有说向他们说，
and it is not registered in the Chinese.
中文翻译忽略这个。
So he says, I am a Hebrew.
我是希伯来人。
And this is, in fact, will tell them that the Hebrew people is a Semitic people, a very different kind of people from them on the boat.
所以也就是间接告诉他们说，希伯来人就是撒玛利旦人，
And is very different from all of the sailors on the boat.
所以与船上的其他水手是不一样的。
And look at how he describes his allegiance to God.
在这里我们看到他怎样形容他对耶和华的忠诚。
And so by the word Hebrew, he have explained the type of person he is.
当他说我是希伯来人，他就解释了他是哪一族的人。
And then when he says, I fear the Lord of the God of heaven who made the sea and the dry land, has a different way to answer.
所以当他说我敬畏耶和华，那创造沧海旱地之天上的神就给了他们很不一样的答案。
All the questions that they are asking is answered in that one line.
他的答案呢，全部就是在这一行字里。
Now, let's take a look at what Jonah actually said.
让我们看一看约拿其实他说了什么。
Now, Jonah says that I fear the Lord God of heaven.
约拿说我敬畏耶和华。
Now, we need to be very clear how the Hebrew expresses fear.
我们看一下希伯来文怎样解释这个敬畏。
The meaning of fear in the Hebrew is to be afraid.
在希伯来文这个敬畏呢，就是害怕、惧怕。
Our modern day of explaining fear may not actually capture the meaning of the Hebrew.
我们现在的解释这个害怕呢，未必有捕捉到希伯来文所描述的害怕。
The word fear is really to be afraid.
所以这边的敬畏呢，是真正的害怕。
We have seen this word before in the earlier verses when they were afraid to die.
我们在上几个经文有看到的这个字，就是他们害怕死亡。
And everywhere you see this word, it actually means to be afraid of something.
所以在经文哪里你看到这个字眼敬畏的话呢，就是害怕。
And so to refer to this word as respect and reverence is not so accurate.
所以呢，把它变成尊敬尊敬害怕的话呢，不是很正确。
The actual meaning is to be afraid of God.
在这里应该的意思是应该是害怕、惧怕。
And why does Jonah say that he is afraid of God?
为什么约拿说他害怕耶和华？
Because God has always wanted the Israelites to be afraid of him.
因为呢，耶和华就是要以色列人呢害怕他，
To be afraid of him because he has the ability to judge them.
害怕他、惧怕他，是因为他有那个审判的能力。
God can call fire from heaven to destroy them.
神耶和华可以呼召火来毁灭他们。
And so because of this, all Israelites are called to fear God in this way.
所以呢，以色列人应该要害怕、惧怕耶和华。
And he introduced the name Lord
在这里他有
in
提
this
到
way.
说这个耶和华，
So he is actually referring to a very specific God.
他提到的是一个很特别的神。
None of them in the boat actually is calling out to this God.
船上没有任何人呢呼叫这个神。
and his name is Jehovah.
他的名字就是耶和华。
Unfortunately, the English just says the Lord.
在英文呢，它是叫Lord，
主的。
主
And in that description, Jonah actually describes God as one who made the sea and the dry land.
这里才讲到是那创造沧海旱地之天上的神。
And he just describes that this wind and the storm that's on the sea that they are so afraid to die in is actually made by God.
他想告诉他们说，这个狂风会造成他们死亡的狂风呢，其实呢是创造自神。
And it is this God that he is so afraid of that made all these things.
就是他们所害怕的神呢，就是创造这一切的。
And without saying much, he already said that the wind that has come about is because of him.
这边他也告诉我们说，这些狂风来临是因为他的缘故。
And with this, we go to verse 10. Verse 10.
第10节。
The way that Jonah had described his God made them extremely afraid.
这边他们就大大的惧怕。
Now, this word, afraid, is the same word as I fear God.
这个惧怕就是刚才讲的惧怕耶和华。
And just now in the Chinese, it was translated as 敬畏.
敬畏。
And so you can see that the translation of the Hebrew into any language, whether English or Chinese, is very tricky.
所以你发现到将希伯来文翻译成英文或者是中文呢，是有一些变化。
It says here, and then, and you should know that this is a continuation of something that happened before.
在前面呢，应该有一个然后，就是说之前也发生一些事情。
And just now, Jonah introduced his God, Jehovah, God who created the sea and the dry land.
前一段呢，约拿已经介绍了他的耶和华，就是那创造沧海陆地的神。
And by saying that, the men became afraid.
那么他这样说了，他们就大大的惧怕。
It is important for us to realize that these men heard more than what we read in the translation.
我相信这些人呢，他所听到约拿所说的比我们在读这边翻译的更多。
And it is about Jonah saying that everything that they are seeing with the winds and the waves has to do with his God, Jehovah.
就是约拿说的这些狂风大雨呢，是因为他的神所创造的，而且
Now, in verse 9, in the second, verse 10, in the second phrase, it says, and then.
这边说然后，
and it's not there in the Chinese.
就是对他说之前有个然后。
And what did they say now?
所以他们说什么？
They said, how could you do this?
你做的是什么事呢？
No. The English had translated it slightly different from the Chinese.
英文和中文呢有一些微差。
No, the Chinese is actually a bit clearer in this translation.
中文呢会比较清楚的说，你做的是什么事呢？
The idea is not how, but the idea uh, is why.
它的主要意思是说为什么？哦，什么
Uh,
是？
it
什
should
么
be
是？
a why and not a how.
哦，应该是个为什么？
Because the men knew that he was running from the presence of God because he had told them.
哦，因为他们已经知道他躲避耶和华，因为他告诉了他们。
And the idea is what is the reason for him to run away from God?
哦，应该是什么是什么的原因，使让你要躲避耶和华？
And because of this, they now know that Jehovah, the God who created the sea and the dry land, is a most powerful and true God.
所以他们知道，耶和华那创造沧海和陆地的是一个大能者，大能者。
And by this, they realize that their gods cannot do this.
所以他们发现到，他们自己的神明呢不能够做到。
And by understanding the God of Jonah, so they're asking, why are you doing this if you have such a great and mighty God?
哦，既然他们是想知道，既然你有一个这样大能的神，那为什么你这样做？
And that is a very good question to Jonah.
所以这是个很好的问题，是为什么你这样做？
If you knew that this God is so powerful, why are you running away from him?
所以说，既然你知道你的神是个大能者，为什么你还逃避他呢？
And now in verse 11, they said to him, what should we do to you so that the sea will become calm for us? For the sea was becoming increasingly stormy.
所以在11节里面可以看到，他们问他说：“我们当向你怎样行，使海浪平静呢？”这话是因海浪越发翻腾。
Now, again, you would find in verse 11, there is the and then in the front.
所以翻译
But
应
it's
该在
not in the
前面也
Chinese.
是要有一个然后。
And they want to know what is the solution to this problem.
他们也想知道要有一个怎样的解决方法。
It says, what should we do to you?
他们说：“我们当向你怎样做？”
So it is about doing something to Jonah.
就是说向约拿做什么？
They realized that it was because of Jonah, the winds were so strong that they are almost going to die.
所以他们知道，因为约拿的缘故，所以狂风大作，他们差点要死了。
So what can they do to Jonah so that the winds will die down?
所以他们要向约拿做什么呢？才能够使海浪平静下来？
And so this is the word to be silent, to be calm.
所以这个字就是平静。
And it really means to be silent.
这里的意思就是能够安静，
And that all the storm will stop.
好让这些狂风呢、海浪呢可以停下来。
And that is the understanding of this word.
所以这个字的意思是这样。
And that is their thinking of looking for a solution.
这个就是他们想要寻求解决方法的想法。
Now, the reason why they are so anxious is because the sea was becoming increasingly stormy.
他们那么紧张紧急，是因为呢，这个海浪呢越发的翻腾。
Now, in the how should we say? In the Hebrew, it literally tells us that the sea is walking faster is walking and raging.
它在希伯来文呢是说这个海浪呢是在翻腾，很汹涌啊，
And they are getting more and more afraid.
所以他们越来越害怕。
We come to verse 12.
我们看一下第12节。
Again, it begins with and then.
在前面也应该有一个然后。
You notice both the English and Chinese doesn't quite want to translate this and then word.
所以中文和英文呢都没有把这个然后的字眼呢放下去。
I'm highlighting to you so that you know that it is one is happening after another and another thing is going to happen.
我就是在这里重申，就是说一件事情发生了，然后才发生下一件事情。
Now he said to them.
他对他们说
This is the solution.
这个就是解决方法。
It says, pick me up and then throw me into the sea.
你们将我抬起来，然后抛在海中。
And that is the and then that is missing.
应该有一个然后抛在海中。
It is after you live, then only you throw.
就是说，你先把我抬起来，然后你才抛。
Now, this word throw or hurl is the same word as God throwing the winds at them in the sea.
这个抛呢，其实也是讲耶和华怎样抛出那个大风在海中。
Now we will, and then he says, then the sea will become calm for you, because I know that on account of me, this great storm has come upon you.
他说海就有平静了，我知道你们遭这大风是因我的缘故。
And this is the solution that Jonah is proposing to them.
这个是约拿提出来的解决方法。
Now, this is a very unusual solution.
这是一个很不寻常的方法。
This is nothing that they have thought about.
这个是他们从来没有想到的。
They would be thinking, well, what can you do to please God or make him calm down? Something along the lines of different religions in the world.
他们应该是想到说，用什么方法可以讨好神，可以使神平复下来，或者是用什么其他的宗教方式。
Now, in verse 13, we are told of what they tried to do.
在第13节，他告诉我们他们做些什么。
It says here, this word here is and then.
在这里他说然而。
This is Chinese is closer, but it is something that they tried to do after Jonah gave the solution.
这个是表示说他们在约拿提出建议之后呢，他们才要做的。
It says here the men rowed desperately to return to land, but they could not because the sea was becoming even stormier against them.
所以说到，然而那些人呢，协力烫桨，要把船呢拢岸，但是却不能，因为海浪越发向他们翻腾。
Now let's take a look at this verse a little bit. The word here is row.
我们看一下，这边是说烫桨。
And the understanding of this word in the Hebrew is like they are digging into the water.
在希伯来文呢，这边表示说在滑在水中滑。
And they are trying to dig so hard into the water, but they are not going anywhere.
所以他们尝试全力就是要滑，但是呢都不能够去任何方向。
And it is becoming stronger and stronger against them.
所以那时候呢，那个狂风越来越强。
Now that they have realized that by themselves they cannot resolve this problem,
现在他们发现到呢，用他们自己的能力是不能够解决这个问题。
they have to consider what Jonah has suggested as a solution.
所以他们必须要考虑约拿告诉他们的解决的方案。
The solution is to lift him up and then throw him into the sea.
那个方法呢，就是将他抬起来，然后抛在海中。
In verse 14,
第14节
it begins by and then, but it's not there in the English, in the Chinese.
所以在这里前面也应该要有一个然后。
They cried out to the Lord.
他们便求告耶和华说
Now, the word cry out is like how they cried out to their gods earlier on.
这边的求告呢，就像之前他们这样大声求告他们自己的神明。
And it is with a loud voice.
所以这里是大声的。
And so they are calling out now to Jehovah.
现在他们是大声求告耶和华。
Notice they don't know Jehovah as their God earlier on.
之前呢，他们并不认识耶和华。
Now they know who Jehovah is as the creator of the sea and the dry land.
可是现在他们知道了，耶和华就是那创造沧海和陆地的神。
And this is the God that has sent the strong winds and the waves to almost kill them.
而且也是这个耶和华呢，刮起这个大风呢，差一点失去了，让他们失去生命。
And now let us read what they are saying to God.
那我们看一下他们对耶和华说什么。
Now notice we have some missing words as well. This word is and then.
这里也是有少了字，然后。
It is calling out to God for help, and these are the words they said.
也就是向耶和华求告求助，这是他们说。
And it says, "We pray earnestly, pray, O Lord."
这里说耶和华，我们恳求你。
This idea of praying is not our common understanding of pray.
这里呢，并不是我们普通上民理解的那个祷告。
How should we should look at this by saying calling on God for help.
这边我们应该看像是说他是求告来求帮助。
It would be to cry for help.
求助。
That would be a better way of understanding this word.
这个是比较正确的理解就是求助。
And it says, "Do not let us perish on account of this man's life."
不要因这人的生命使我们死亡。
And so they realize that it is important for them to be alive and not die because of this one person.
所以他们觉得这个很重要，他们要活着，不要因为这人的生命呢使到他们死亡。
And so this word is perish.
所以这个字死亡。
And it is used in a way where somebody is going to die eventually, in this storm.
所以这边就是说，在这个风暴的结果呢，会死亡。
And so it says, do not let us die because of this man.
所以就不要因为这个人而使我们死亡。
Now, there is another phrase here,
这边还有另外一个句子，
and this is important for us to pay attention to.
这个我们要多注意一下。
It says, do not put innocent blood on us.
说不要使流无辜血的罪归于我们。
The word here is innocent blood.
这个字无辜血。
Now, the Chinese have added some words like this.
中文里面说的罪，
It does not appear in the Hebrew.
这个在希伯来文里是没有出现的。
And that is also why you don't see it in the English as well.
所以在英文里的字眼也没有看到。
This is more of an interpretation of the understanding by the Chinese translators.
这个是因为翻译者想要使到人家更加的明白。
But it is not completely wrong.
没有完全的错误。
Now, what does this mean, innocent blood?
这个无辜血是什么意思？
Now, the word innocent blood means, how should we say, guiltless, right? Guiltless, without guilt, or free from guilt.
这边无辜表示说无罪。无
And it
罪。
is important for us to understand what this really means.
所以很重要，我们要明白这是真正什么意思。
Now, they know that it is because of Jonah that the strong winds are there as a sign of God being very angry with Jonah.
他们都知道，因为约拿的缘故而刮起这个狂风，而且这个也是一个上帝很生气的那个表示。
And the solution that Jonah suggested was to pick him up and throw him into the sea.
约拿的解决方法呢，就是把他抬起来抛向大海。
And this whole aspect of the solution has to do with a life.
这整个解决方法呢，所以影响到一个生命。
And the life is described by blood.
这个生命呢是用血来代表。
And as you know, in Genesis chapter 9, we are told not to eat blood because the life is in the blood.
在创世纪第9章有讲到说，我们不应该吃或者喝血，因为血呢是代表生命。
And that is how the Hebrew looks at blood.
所以这个希伯来人呢，就是理解血，
And it represents life.
那就代表着生命。
And it is very important to protect life.
而且呢，来保护生命呢是很重要的。
But now Jonah is saying, throw his life into the sea.
所以约拿说，把他的生命抛向大海。
And in the mind of all these Gentiles, the non-Israelites, they also know that taking a life or killing a life is wrong.
所以在这些非以色列人的眼中呢，使人丧失生命呢，其实是不对的。
And we know that God in Genesis chapter 9 also told Noah that you cannot take the life of another human being.
而在创世纪第9章神也是告诉挪亚说，你不能够拿走生命。
And And here they are seeing that they now have to throw a life into the sea, and that life will die.
所以他们看到说，把一个人的生命，把一个人丢进大海中呢，也就是拿走他的生命。
And they are praying to Jehovah God not to place guilt on them when they do this.
所以呢，他们就求告耶和华神说，不要让他们流无辜血的罪。
That they are, they cannot be guilty of this.
他们不应该归罪于他们。
And he says, "For you, Lord, have done as you pleased."
因为你耶和华是随自己的意志行事。
And so they didn't quite understand how is it that when you throw Jonah into the sea and thinking that he will die, that God will bring calm to the sea.
所以他们不能理解将约拿呢抛弃海中，会使到上帝呢海平静。
But they are not Israelites, and they will probably never know very much.
他们都不是以色列人，所以他们不是很理解。
Because they do not know much about Jehovah God.
因为他们对耶和华神呢不太了解。
But all they know is killing a life is wrong.
他们知道拿走别人生命，一个生命呢是不对的。
And seeing that God has sent the wind, God can remove the wind.
他们也看到神呢可以有能力刮起大风，他也能够使这个风移走。
And by throwing Jonah into the sea, everything will be solved.
就将把约拿呢抛进海中，这些一切都可以解决了。
And that is why it says, "For you, Lord, have done as you pleased."
所以在这里他们说，因为你耶和华是随自己的意志行事。
They do not know why, but they will do it.
他们不明白为什么，但是他们将会做。
Because this Jehovah God is greater than their own gods.
因为这耶和华神大过他们的神。
We look at verse 15.
我们看一下第15节。
And it says, "So,"
这里应该
and
是
it means
睡
"and then,"
也就是然后。
and it's not in the Chinese. And they picked up Jonah and then throw him into the sea.
他们遂将约拿抬起。牧师，这个遂就是然后的意思。
And then throw him into the sea.
抛在海中，然后抛在海中。
That was exactly the solution that Jonah had given them.
这个就是约拿给予他们的解决方法。
And they are so scared of doing it because they are thinking that they are going to kill somebody this way.
他们很害怕这样做，因为这样他们会杀害了一个人。
And so what happened was immediately thereafter, the sea stops its raging.
这边说海的狂浪就平息了。
Now this word is "and then," and it is also missing in the Chinese right here.
这里也应该要有一个然后。
And so this one happened. This is the second thing that happened, and this is the third thing that happened.
所以呢，这个是第一项发生的事情，然后第二项的，然后就是第三项的事情。
We come to the end of the chapter in verse 16.
来，我们看到这边最后一节，第16节。
It says, "Then," and this is "and then," and it's not there.
这边应该有个然后。
And after they saw the wind stop, they are also shocked.
他们看到这个风平静了，他们很惊讶。
As as raging, as angry as the sea was, and suddenly there was nothing.
因为当时的海浪波涛滚滚，可是现在却平静了。
And so it says here, the men became extremely afraid of the Lord.
这里说到那些人便大大敬畏耶和华。
So this word extremely afraid is in Chinese, this word.
在这中文里面说大大敬畏，
This word really means to be afraid.
所以这边也是一说惧怕，
Because this is the God that can send the winds to destroy them and can take away the wind.
因为就是这个耶和华呢，可以刮取这个大风，也可以把这个刮风移走。
Now, after they realize that this God called Jehovah, he is so powerful.
所以他们也发现到这个神叫做耶和华是多么的大能力。
And then you find that this English word then is and then, and it is missing in the Chinese.
这边也是要有然后，
When they are afraid of this God, it is because they realize this God is real and powerful.
因为他们发现到这个耶和华神呢是真正的大能，
It is different from all their gods that they cried out and nothing happened.
跟其他他们所求告的神其实完全没有帮不到。
And then they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and then made vows.
这里说他们向耶和华献祭，并且许愿。
Now, again, there is this word and then, and it's missing in the Chinese right here.
这里应该就要有个然后。
Now, what is so important here for us to understand is that they offered a sacrifice.
这里要明白是一个他们献祭。
And in the Hebrew, this word has there are two words to represent this.
在希伯来文这里有两个词，
This word actually means to slaughter an animal and to sacrifice to
在
God.
希伯来文是说这里要宰杀一只动物，然后献祭给神。
So it is not just to sacrifice anything, but there is an animal involved.
所以并不是要献任何东西，但是有一只动物。
And this is important for us to realize they are responding to their gods or responding to Jehovah the way that they would respond to any god.
可以再讲一次吗？
They are responding to Jehovah like
Mm.
they are responding to any god they have.
所以他们向耶和华的反应吗？反应。
Yes. 对. And this response is to slaughter an animal and sacrifice.
他们向耶和华的反应呢，就是呢宰杀一只动物献祭。
Just like they would do to their gods.
这个也是他们向他们的神明所做的做法。
Do not take this as the Levitical sacrifices.
不要把它当做这个是那个利未人的那做法。
This is really a Gentile reacting to Jehovah.
这个就是非以色列人向耶和华做出的反应。
And then they made a vow.
然后他们许愿。
Now, this idea of making a vow is not just making a promise to God.
这里呢，许愿并不是说许下一个诺言，
This idea here is very likely that they are turning to Jehovah God.
这里呢很想应该是他们呢，他们的忠诚呢转向耶和华神，
Because they have seen the power of Jehovah.
因为他们见证了耶和华的大能。
And so this vow is really to promise that they will follow and learn more about him.
所以这个誓言呢，应该是他们所许下的誓言呢，就是跟从耶和华。
And this is the end of chapter 1.
这个就是来到第1章的结尾。